Hello and welcome, crafty friends. Today we're going to be making some DIY cardstock frames that you can use on your cards, on your art journals, your junk journals, your scrapbook pages, your memory decks cards. Whatever you're creating today, you could pop a DIY cardstock frame on it. Here I have a bunch of DIY cardstock frames that I've made without frame dies. I've used several different techniques, so whatever tools you have, whatever techniques you're familiar with, hopefully you'll be able to create your own frames. The main way that I create DIY frames is to use nesting dies. These are dies where you have multiple sizes of the same shape. So I've got a stitched star die here, and then I've got a smaller stitched star die, and I'm going to pop that inside the big die, holding them both in place with a bit of low tack tape, and I've got a roughly equal size gap between the two dies. Now I can pop that on a bit of cardstock and run that through my die cutting machine. So now I can take off my low tack tape, and I've got a star from the middle of the smaller die, but now I've got a frame from in between the two dies, and I could use that as it is on a card, or maybe to frame an aperture in a card, a shaker card, something like that. If you want a thicker frame, then instead of using the next size die down, use the next size die down from that. I'll show you what I mean. So I've got my low tack tape, and I can pop my big die on the low tack tape, but instead of putting this size die in, the next size down, I've got the next size down from that. So you get a bigger gap created between the two dies, and that will give you a bigger frame. So I'm going to take my tape off again, take the middle star out, and now I've got a frame that is thicker. And the nesting die method is the same method I use to create all these frames. So here I've got 2 hearts to make this heart frame, 2 butterflies, 2 banners, 2 tags, and 2 circles. So whatever nesting dies you've got, you can create frames with them. But you don't just have to use the same shape inside. You could create a frame. I suppose it's more of an aperture, but it's still a frame. You could say pop a heart inside a circle. So we've got our heart from the middle, and then we've got a circular frame with a heart cut out of it. And you could back that with some acetate, turn it into a shaker, turn it into a window, or inlay a different colour heart, maybe a gold glitter heart in there, that would look nice. So I think with this tag die, instead of having a tag shaped window, you could have maybe a rectangular window. So I've got a rectangular die here, and it's double stitched. It's stitched on the outside of the cut line as well. So when this cuts a hole in my tag, there'll be some stitching around it. And all I've got to do is get it lined up nicely. So instead of a tag-shaped aperture in our frame, we've got a stitched rectangle aperture in our frame. Now I want to create a Polaroid style frame, and I've just got 1 square die to do that with. And all I'm going to do is use my trimmer to trim out a rectangle, and it's going to be a little bit bigger than this. So I'm going to mark that about there. It doesn't have to be particularly accurate. You can adjust the size afterwards. So I've got the outside of my frame there, and now I just need to tape this in place towards the top of the frame. And I'll hold that in place and die cut. So there we have a Polaroid style frame. If it's not quite the right size, you can get your trimmer and make it a bit smaller. And if you want to make it look a bit more like the outside has been die cut, just take an embossing tool like this and press it around the edge, just run it down the edge, and that will bevel the edge over and make it look as if it's been die cut. If you've got a corner round a punch and you would like your frame to have a rounded corner or two, you could use that. This has got quite a big corner on it. You can get smaller ones so that the curve isn't quite so big. So you can go square corners or round corners. And if you haven't got a square die, you can go really old school. So I'm just going to make a little square out of card. And this is going to act as a template. And I'll draw around this square with pencil. And I can take a sharp craft knife and a metal ruler and carefully cut along my pencil mark. Don't worry about going into the corners on your first pass. Just get your lines more or less to the corners. And then if your cut line hasn't quite gone to the corner, you can go in and do that. You can do it freehand or you could use the ruler. Just be really careful. Pop it out. And that's fine like that, but you could, if you wanted, do the edge beveling thing again. It'll give you a bit of a neater edge. And there is a DIY Polaroid frame. And I can see that this is a bit wonky. It's narrower at this end than it is at this end, but I can rectify that and go in again with my craft knife. Before we wrap up, I wanted to show you this frame that I cut with these two nesting postage stamp dies. Because the outside of the frames has that wibbly wobbly postage stamp edge, you get that in the frame, in the inside of the frame, which gives you quite a nice effect, I think. But again, you don't have to use the smallest size down for that. You could find a rectangle die to cut out. If you didn't have the right size rectangle die, you could use your craft knife and a ruler, as I've shown you with the Polaroid style frame. But if you've got one of these trimmers with one of these blades that pierces the paper, you can start your cut wherever you want it. Just clean that off a bit. Now, my blade here seems to get stuck on this runner sometimes. It gets a bit juddery, so I'm just thinking, I wonder if I put a bit of candle wax on there, if that will help it go. I think that might help. So again, I'm going to add some pencil marks as a guide. And I'm going to pop this in here, press it against the edge to make sure it's square, and line up the wire here, which is a guide, with my pencil mark. This blade also has some little lines on it, here and here, here and here, which line up with the blade. So I'm going to make sure this line here is in line with my pencil. And I'm going to push down and cut until this line here is in line with the bottom pencil mark. And then just rotate that and do the same thing all the way around. When trying to be accurate lining things up, it's a really good idea to put your head right over and look down vertically like that, and then you'll see if it's lined up properly. I do tend to cut those bits out of my videos because you really don't want to see the back of my head. If you haven't quite got into the corners, you could use a craft knife to do that. And there you have a frame. And of course you can bevel the edges with your edge beveler, just to make them look a bit neater. And you can use an eraser to rub out the pencil marks. Just a quick note before I go. If you want to give your frames a little bit more sturdiness, a bit of dimension, you could cut them from card that you've stuck to some double-sided adhesive like this. So I can take my dies out. Just going to pop this on here. And there you have a nice dimensional frame. So it's got a little bit of a lift to it. As well as using foam to give your frames dimension, you can make your own DIY chipboard. So I popped the heart in the smaller circle here, and I've cut 1 from pink and 3 from some scrap white card, and I made sure not to move the arrangement here because you want all of them to be identical. If you were to move the heart inside the circle shape, they wouldn't be identical. And all you need to do with these is add some liquid glue. I like to use liquid glue for this because it gives you wiggle room. If you use double-sided adhesive, you haven't got any of that wiggle room usually. So you just pop them one on top of the other and put them in exactly the right place. Just wiggle them around a bit. And add your top layer, whether you've cut that from coloured cardstock, pattern paper, DIY backgrounds. Pop a bit of something on that, just give it a good press. And there you have a DIY chipboard frame. And this could go on the front of a card like that. And I've just cut a heart using that small heart die. And I've cut it from pearlized gold cardstock. I can pop that in there, inlay it so it's slightly recessed, and all that needs is a sentiment. So you can use foam or cardstock to make your own dimensional frames. Right, there you go, a bunch of ways to make your own DIY cardstock paper frames for use on your papercraft projects. I hope you've enjoyed the video and it's given you a few ideas. If it has, please do let me know in the comments. Also, please let me know of any more DIY type videos that you'd like to see from me. I'm quite happy to play with my stash and see what I can come up with. If you'd like to see more from me, do subscribe and ring the notification bell, and I'll see you back here very soon for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.